Good morning, everyone. What a great day to be a Card. I'm Brian Brownfield, the Director of Communications for Stanford Football. Thank you so much for joining us here this morning at the Arriaga Fieldhouse. A couple of reminders before we officially get underway. Please, just a reminder, everybody make sure your cell phones are on silent. We don't want any distractions here this morning. Following our press conferences, we will have an opportunity for a few brief one-on-ones. For anyone who wants to speak to Tavita Pritchard, it'll be up here behind our red backdrop. Andrew Luck is going to be at the black backdrop with Maddie Gautreaux, and John Donahoe will be at the white backdrop with Brian Rizzo. And lastly, any media are welcome to stay and use the third floor of the Stanford Stadium press box to work afterwards. We have that available till 3:30 p.m. Golf cart shuttles will be available, and lunch is also available. We'll start with opening remarks from the Jaquish and Kenninger Director and Chair of Athletics, John Donahoe, followed by remarks from General Manager for Stanford Football, Andrew Luck, who will then introduce the Bradford and Freeman Director of Football, Tavita Pritchard. We will open it up for questions after that. At this time, I'll turn it over to John Donahoe.
So good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Yeah, it's cold in here. Let's warm this up. So today is an incredibly exciting day for Stanford football, for Stanford athletics, and for Stanford University. And Andrew's going to properly introduce Coach Pritchard here in a minute, but I just want to say a few words about the process of how we got here. Over the past several months, we have conducted a very thorough and high-integrity hiring process. Our search was led by our general manager, Andrew, but it involved active participation from President Levin, Condi Rice, Professor Jay Mitchell, who's the faculty representative for Stanford Athletics, and myself. Coach Wright also played an important advisory role both to Andrew and to the committee. Now, we saw very strong interest in this role from candidates that had multiple backgrounds, and we thank everyone that expressed interest. But I will tell you, at the end of the day, the answer was clear. Coach Pritchard was by far the best leader for Stanford football for this next phase. And Coach Pritchard, I want you to understand that not only do you have the full support of everybody in this room, but you have the full support of Stanford Athletics, Stanford University, and the entire Stanford community. And so I want to just extend my personal congratulations to you and to your family. Say welcome back to the farm. We look forward to an exciting next several years. And with that, I'll turn it over to our general manager, Andrew Luck.
Appreciate it. Thank you, John. Appreciate it, boss. Good morning, everyone. A special good morning. It's a beautiful day to introduce a special leader and our next head football coach. And before I get going, there are two legends in the room that I do have to shout out. Coach Tara Vanderveer, you're in the back there. Amazing. And the great Jim Plunkett and Jerry Plunkett are sitting at the front here. There's a long history of Tavita and the Plunketts that he can get into. But this is special for us. This is special for our university. And what a beautiful morning. What a beautiful day. It's been a unique year at Stanford, in Stanford football, to say the least. And I'm especially proud of the program and the folks, the players, our staff, our university leadership, John Donahoe, President Levin, Provost Martinez, Condi, and our outgoing coach, Frank Reich. You know, they've started something real and laid an incredible foundation for success and to launch forward into this next phase. This year has also offered me a long runway in coming to a head coaching decision for the future, right? Not everybody gets that. And so we canvassed the country. We went to leagues, both big and small, to find the best head coach for us at this moment. And as John mentioned, this process, was both broad and deep, and cream rises to the top, right? Which which leads us to the man sitting next to me, Tavita Pritchard. Amongst many things, Tavita has special leadership qualities. He is a connector of people, a high football IQ and acumen, has worked with some unbelievable quarterbacks, got to work under Vic Fangio to start his coaching career, and really everything in between. He has the heart of a teacher, the patience, the care that's required to teach the great game of football, and the soul of a dogged competitor, a dogged competitor. All of this has been affirmed through the years since I've known him. Yes, I met him when I was 18 and beat you out. It's been affirmed through this interview process, both to me and to the committee, as John Donahoe has mentioned. And finally, it's been affirmed from the references across the NFL, from players that he's coached like Marcus Mariota, Zach Ertz, from coaches you've coached with and for like Cliff Kingsbury and Dan Quinn. And it is now my honor and privilege to introduce the 37th head football coach in Stanford history, the Bradford M. Freeman Director of Football, Tavita Pritchard.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's great to see some of these familiar faces around here. I'd like to start, President Levin, committee, Provost Martinez, John Donahoe, Brad Freeman. Thank you for your trust in me and for partnering with me to make Stanford football what we all know it can be. To my head coaches here who I've had the privilege of working with and learning from directly, Coach Harbaugh and Coach Shaw, you taught me what belief in this place and these student athletes can do for Stanford football. Thank you. To my siblings and family at large, I can still remember you piling into the 15-passenger van after a late-night high school football game and drive the 13 hours from Washington to watch me in that stadium right there. Thank you for believing in me from the very beginning. Fafatai telelava, ote alofotele, yate oto umwa. For those who I haven't yet met, my name is Tavita Liumotumotu Ani Leafi Pritchard, Jr. I'll give you a second to write that down. I grew up in Lakewood, Washington, alongside 10 brothers and sisters. I'm a product of my mother, Kelly, who comes from a working-class family that moved from Terre Haute, Indiana to the West Coast in search of opportunity. My mom is the most curious, compassionate, people-centered person I know. She's a woman who walks out of a taxi and knows a driver's entire life story and their childhood dreams and probably their blood type too. I work every day to live and love like you, Mom. My dad is David, which is the English translation of Tavita, and that's your Samoan lesson for the day. His parents are from American Samoa and moved here when my grandfather joined the military, and they planted roots in Washington. He would wake us up at the crack of dawn every day to read 5 Psalms and 1 proverb. It didn't matter whether we were out late at a tournament the night before or at a fa'alave, we were going to be up with the raccoons the next day. He taught me what integrity in action looks like. There aren't enough words for how grateful I am to have my parents, my wife's parents, who I claim as my own, my auntie, uncle, and some of my siblings here with me today. I love you all. On Dad's side, I come from the Fasamoa, which means the Samoan way. This idea embodies our values around respect, family, and connection. When something happens to one of us, we collectively surround them with a love and ferocity. The Fasamoa speaks to us never being too big or too small for the group. My parents used to run a pizza store, and so my siblings and I were always in the back running the most efficient pizza box folding operation in town. We ran that assembly line for school lunches, for washing dishes, and for getting the little kids ready for school. Everything was about team over self. But don't get it twisted. It wasn't always kumbaya. We were always, and I mean always, competing. My little brother and I still butt heads over who got the better of who during a family basketball game over the holidays about 10 years ago. And Tana, if you're watching, we both know I got you, dog. My background is core to why I've always sought out and felt most comfortable on teams. But it's also probably no surprise that when I arrived here as a freshman in 2005, I had a little bit of imposter syndrome. I showed up to this premier institution of higher education, expected to be surrounded by classmates who were competitive, but with more of a dog-eat-dog, individual, every man for himself kind of attitude. What I found here was quite the opposite. I walked into a freshman dorm, shout out Rinconada, with doors thrown wide open. Around every corner were kind, hilarious, exceptional people from every single walk of life. People like Fred Campbell, my training camp freshman roommate, a linebacker from the Bronx whose mom was Native Alaskan. Fred was quiet, thoughtful, quirky, and he hit like a ton of bricks. And then he very casually went on to get his degree in computational science and mathematics from Stanford, his master's degree from Stanford in statistics, and then Rice for his PhD in statistics. Oh, and by the way, became a North Face sponsored climber that went on an Everest expedition. Stanford is where I met Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin-bred Kit Garton, the beautiful, brilliant, irreverent Gaieties performer who went on to help grow a major clothing brand with fellow classmates from Stanford, and who has been one of my first phone calls for every major life event since. Stanford is where I met Cape Verdean star volleyball player Cynthia Barbosa, who some of you may remember, who banters like no other and is gracefully competent at everything she does. And she first introduced me to my wife, Caroline, one night at the Enchanted Broccoli Forest. And for those of you who don't know, we do have a residence called the Enchanted Broccoli Forest. I came to learn that Stanford is a living, breathing organism that embodies team. It is collaborative, connected, and full of people who push each other to reach their wide-ranging goals and take on the world. We went hard every day. We studied hard, we worked hard, we trained hard. We were the best kind of exhausted. And then in my sophomore year, our team went 1-11, which is when a new staff arrived to Stanford. They poured into me and my teammates with an unrelenting belief of what we were capable of together. They built a disciplined system around us that turned into a brotherhood which created a Stanford football juggernaut. Yes, I did eventually lose my starting job to some scrub named Andrew Luck. I have the mic last. But experiencing that turnaround on this campus was one of the most formative experiences of my life. And losing my spot to Andrew actually became a catalyst for my coaching career. And while I had a singular dream to be the head coach here at Stanford, I needed to leave and stretch and learn in order to realize that dream. I expected to go to the NFL and get my PhD in football. It's what you always hear. All football, all the time. And I absolutely loved and grew around X's and O's and scheme and game management. But what I was surprised by was how much it strengthened my convictions around all of the things I learned in the back of that pizza store as a kid. And about our Fa Samoa. It's all about people, supporting people, believing in people, and building a staff who are passionate about developing student athletes. Fostering connection and trust as a means of developing true brotherhood. I received a masterate class in this exactly, learning under Dan Quinn the last 2 years. And I got to be a proud alum, looking in as the alignment at this place on every level comes together with such momentum. Stanford is a place that's world-class on every level. And now everyone from the president and provost to the faculty to the AD and GM to our incredible fans and alum have tasked us to bring Stanford football back to a world-class operation. When I think about this program today and look at the remarkable young men on this team, I feel hopeful and I feel ready. As I shared with our players on our first team meeting yesterday, which was pretty freaking cool, by the way, we're going to be all about belief and brotherhood and competition. We will be committed to the process of winning, as I heard Magic Johnson once put it really well. That looks like going hard every single day, playing full speed and getting after it in practice, in meetings, in games, a defense that's fast and physical and arrives violently. Think about Shane Scove. Think about Bo McNally. Think about Trent Murphy. A couple of those guys are in here. An offense that's innovative and relentless and imposes our will on anyone who lines up against us. Think Michael Wilson and Jim Dre, David DeCastro, and Christian McCaffrey. We will thrive in moments of discomfort and vulnerability because nothing great ever happens when people are comfortable. We know that fierce competition is a habit that we are building together and that it only works because of trust and connection. It geeks me up to think about how to cultivate this environment. And I can't wait to get to work with Andrew, the staff, and the players to make it happen. I wanted to save a few things for the end. When I think about where I'm picking up as a leader of this program, John mentioned this, but there has been clear groundwork that's been laid thanks to Coach Frank Reich. Frank is an accomplished coach and player whose praises I first heard from Andrew and Zach Ertz. But to see it in action at a place that I know so intimately and the student athletes I believe in so deeply, it's very clear to me that Coach Reich is and always will be a Stanford man. Thank you, Frank. Andrew, thank you, brother, for trusting me and believing in me to do this job. I cannot wait to build an elite system of support around these student athletes. We'll fill out an army of people to support them so they can each find their superpower in the service of our team. I believe our connection will set the standard of trust, communication, and collaboration that will help this program reach the highest of heights. Even just the past few days of dreaming big together and making recruiting calls has me juiced up like we're kids again, man. 18 and 20. But for the record, I still believe I should have started over you. Let's make sure we get that written down, please. To my little family, I love you all. You remain the centerpiece of all of this for me. Afi, Manu, Leone, Tala, I'm eternally grateful to be your dad. You teach me and grow me every day, and I'm so excited to be on this adventure with you. Caroline, my cubberly crush. You are the most remarkable human. You're an accomplished children's book writer, do all the heavy lifting with our 4 kids, and still somehow manage to support me in my dreams. Together with you, I feel invincible taking on the world. Thank you, I love you, and here's to many more post-victory pictures out there on that field. I'm happy to get more into the X's and O's and the football with you all during Q&A. I'm so happy to have everyone here with us. Fafatai Tele Lava, thank you for being here.
All right, we'll now open it up for questions. Please raise your hand. We'll have mic holders on both sides, so we will find you. A reminder to please introduce yourself and your outlet that you are affiliated with.
Tavita, Josh Gebauer with Associated Press. Congratulations. You talked a little bit in your intro about being here when the team was 1-11, and then obviously you guys built up, Rose Bowls, BCS Bowls, things like that. What lessons did you learn from what Coach Harbaugh was able to do then that you can sort of carry over to the task now?
Yeah. The first thing I would say is I learned about the fortitude of my classmates and teammates and what we were capable of together. In that time, I think what I learned more than anything also was the power of competition, the power of iron sharpening iron, and we just went after it every single day. And when we got into those moments of competition in games, that we shouldn't have won, right? It was everything was forged in that brotherhood on the practice field in the 6 a.m.s, and so I learned the value of healthy competition and just going to work every day and letting the stuff out on the game field take care of itself.
Ann Killian with the San Francisco Chronicle. Andrew, this is for you. In your deep and broad search, how important was it for you to get someone who was a Stanford person, someone who understood the culture of Stanford, which is, as we know, a pretty unique place?
It sat there. It sat there as a real question. Oh, that microphone is right in our way. Man, it sat there as a real question, but it was not a necessary. It was not a necessary. When it came to Tavita, it was a bonus. Because there's not that many folks coaching out there with an intimate and deep history of this place. And frankly, I also saw Frank Reich come in and do an unbelievable job, really only knowing the school through James Lofton, his teammate, and then, how much Zach Ertz and I would just talk about it, when we played for him. So it wasn't a necessary, but certainly a bonus, because we do know there is a learning curve. I mean, there's a bunch of learning curves that Tavita's on the continuum of, and there is a sort of Stanford learning curve. I certainly had a bit of a reacquaintance with it, coming back as GM, but I do know Tavita starts pretty far along that Stanford learning curve that's unique. Thanks, Sam.
Ron Krojcik, also from the San Francisco Chronicle. Hi, Andrew. This question's for you as well. You mentioned Tavita's special leadership qualities.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you have a story or a memory from your younger days that illustrates that.
I do.
I thought you might.
I thought I had the mic last.
Two things come to mind. One, I was a freshman. It was in the summer. We do work. I'd just come from Houston, Texas. It was maybe week 1 or week 2, and we had voluntary practices, and I had no idea what the playbook was. I didn't know. I didn't know how to do anything. I remember sitting in the couches in our old locker room. It must have been a Thursday night after a voluntary team practice, maybe like 8 p.m., and there was an early morning workout the next day, and I worked the courage up to go ask the starting quarterback what Hound 2 protection was, right? It's an old school West Coast. There's Fox and Hound. It's a West Coast protection. I didn't understand it. I'd never played with a fullback. I didn't know what it meant. And Tavita spent like 20 minutes with me on the couch, 8 to 8:20 or something like that, and explained Hound protection to me. And I didn't listen. I couldn't hear anything the first 10 minutes because I was too intimidated that the starting quarterback was actually taking time out of his day to teach me something. But that stuck with me for a long time. I think I've told you that story. And then when I ended up starting and Tavita was on the team for that last year and then launched his coaching career. You feel when a room supports you. You feel when a quarterback room is fully behind you, and that's certainly what I felt from Tavita, and it's a big part of why I felt comfortable going out there and playing great football. So as a player, as a young man, those two things really stick out as his humility and leadership through service and leadership through supporting those around him and making those around him feel like they can go, unleash their superpowers. I felt that as a young player, with him as a teammate, and then as a GA.
We'll go Matt
Thanks,
and then
Ron.
Stuart.
Hi, guys. Matt Lively, CBS Sports Bay Area. This is a question for both of you, and it's kind of a two-parter. What does your relationship look like over the last few years, and how close have you remained? And also, have you heard from Coach Harbaugh or Shaw since this announcement was made?
Yeah, I'll start that. Our relationship, I think, has just gotten stronger and stronger since we've left here as players. Obviously, when Andrew left for the NFL, I stayed here and started my coaching career. And I would say as a former teammate, I was just all supportive and a fan, of watching Andrew in those years playing in the NFL. And we stayed in touch, but obviously, as both of our careers in those respective places kicked off, you're really busy, But I'd say we would check in every so often. When Andrew finished playing and came back here, that really allowed us to kind of rekindle a lot of what made us so close in the first place. And it was, Andrew was going to school, I was still coaching, and it was a chance for us to reconnect. But we picked up right where we left off. I mean, I felt that our the history of our relationship really it really was a springboard to even what you're seeing now, which is there's an implicit trust that I have in not just who he is as a football mind, a leader of this program, but a human being, and who he is as a person and as a dad. I have so much trust for who he is that there have already been times where he says, "Hey, I think we should do it this way," and I say, "Great, let's do it, man." Because there's so much trust that's already been built. And then the other one is I've heard from a lot of people in the last 24 to 48 hours. I probably couldn't specify any one or two, but we've heard from a lot, absolutely.
We'll go right side of the room, fourth row.
Sorry. Luca Mazy with Stanford on SI. What do you think is going to be the biggest difference between coaching in the Pac-12 compared to the ACC?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. Can I just say the travel? I mean, looking at some of these cross-country trips, we're going to North Carolina a couple of times next year, Louisville. I think the furthest we ever had to go, other than our non-conference Notre Dame games and such, were Arizona, right? Like, we didn't have to go very far. So that's one. I mean, and I think that's a real consideration, as you think about preparing a team, you think about supporting student athletes, that's a real thing. I mean, even just being in the NFL, right? Going to play the New York Giants from D.C. was different than coming out here to play the Seattle Seahawks. So those are real things you have to think about and talk about. But it does go back to how we support them is such that it's process oriented, so that whether or not we have an hour and a half flight or a 5-hour flight, we're going to prepare the same way. We may have tweaks, but they don't have to worry about those things. That's for me and Andrew.
Right side of the room, fourth row again.
Stuart Mandel with The Athletic. Got one for both of you, if that's okay. Andrew, you just conducted one of the longest coaching searches in the history of college football. I'm wondering if you could give a ballpark of how many different coaches you may have talked to over that time, and why that ultimately led back to a guy, right, who you'd known all along.
Yeah, interviewed close to 30, I want to say, around that, and then a bunch of other informal conversations. I mean, it felt like, and my wife, she knows this. I'd get into football land at home. I'd be sitting there and someone would be talking to me and my mind would just go. And for the last 9 months, my mind would go to who's going to be our next head coach, right? And that felt on the whole time. And who would be the right leader for these young men? I mean, it was laid very bare to me that, about a week or two into the job, and I think I had a bit of one of those moments at night, sort of, there are these two existential things that happened. Like, one, holy smokes, I'm in charge of a Stanford football program that's been around since 1892, right? That's with a legacy of Pop Warner and Bill Walsh and Jim Plunkett and Christian McCaffrey. Like, there's an amazing legacy. And then two, oh my gosh, there's 109 young men on this team whose lives are very much shaped by football and the Stanford football program. So who that leader was, and getting Frank was huge for this year to make sure we went a step forward, right? And then who our next leader, who would bring us into this new era was always front of mind. Talked to a lot of folks, went around the country. I enjoyed the process. I think it helps that I'm an extrovert and I enjoy talking to people and listening to people. And there's again a bunch of interest, a bunch of folks, and it was affirmed, especially towards the end, with the references from around the NFL. It really was, and with the alignment from our committee, behind me, that Tavita was perfect. And look, there's we're going to stub our toes. I mean, there is a lot of work ahead of us. I certainly feel like I've stubbed my toe every day in this job, but I know. We as leadership will continue to get better in our jobs and orient this around serving our young men and building championship culture and championship process, and that's all we can do. Thanks, Stuart.
Thanks. Tavita, welcome back.
Thank you.
You were here on staff for some really great seasons, and then also towards the end, obviously, things started to turn a little bit. With a little distance, what do you learn from those last few seasons in terms of why things started to get away for Stanford, and what you can learn from them to apply now?
Sure. I mentioned it a little bit in the statement, but being away I really, you hear about the NFL and you hear about it's the no fun league, and I expected it to be cold and transactional, and to some degree there were parts of it that were, they were kind of like, hey, we're paying these players, they have these contracts, they're in and out. But in our last season in Washington, on our run to the NFC Championship game, there were so many moments that really were defined by the brotherhood in the locker room. We won some really tight games there towards the end of the season. And I bring that up because when I look across like that run that you're referencing, both in my years as a player and as a coach here, when I think back to some of those locker rooms, like you could really define so many of those teams by the connection in those locker rooms, right? The Rose Bowls in 15 and 13 and 12. I think about some of the guys and the leadership that was present at those times. And so when I think about that run and now coming back, like I'm just strengthening my resolve to make sure that we are creating and cultivating that brotherhood and connection and trust in our locker room as a means, right, to challenge each other, as a means to compete, as a means to motivate our young men, and then even in our leadership on staff, like that's going to be a whole system that's working towards that. And I really think like being away, getting time to see it's with such clarity that it's simple. It goes back to people, supporting people, and that's what we got to get back to. That's what we will.
Left side of the room, row 5.
Ben Parker, On 3 Rivals. Tavita, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, I just kind of want to get your thoughts on, from a schematic standpoint, what did you most learn from your time as a quarterbacks coach, going to the NFL in terms of X's and O's and, game planning and scheming that you can now take into your head coaching role? Yeah,
from the X's and O's and football standpoint, when you're in coaching, as long as I've been, I don't want to count how many years now, there's so many different ways to do things. There are. And obviously, like working under Cliff Kingsbury, right? He was a air raid, Mike Leach trained quarterback. Like we couldn't have come from two different worlds in terms of our football upbringing, right? I came from a 12, 13, 22 personnel, get up there and run it down your throat offense. And he came from a 10 personnel, we're going to throw it 70 times a game offense. But there were a lot of common threads, right? I mean, when it comes to playing great football, it comes back to blocking and tackling and fundamentals. And so when I think about schematically, like where we will go, we will lean into who our Stanford student athletes are, right? On one of our committee calls, John may recall this, right? But I asked them to recall Toby Gerhart, all in one. Think about all these players. Toby Gerhart, okay? Tyler Gaffney, Stephon Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, Bryce Love. All phenomenal running backs and players here in their own right. All very, very different players, right? And that's just one small glimpse of like what Stanford can be, right? We just have to lean into our players' superpowers. And so the scheme is going to be built fully around them. But what I found in the NFL is, and this will speak a little bit too to what Andrew's talking about, there will be some toe stubbing, so to speak, both in the big picture and skip. But like when it gets down to it, we're problem solvers. And that's what we have to be about, especially at Stanford, is we have to go find the guys. I think it was Tara, coach, that you talked about. We don't when we recruit, we don't spread a net. We don't cast a net. We fly fish, right? That's who we are at Stanford. And so when we go find those special student athletes, now we go, okay, what do they look like? What's their superpower? How do we build it around them?
We'll go right side of the room, row 3.
Hey, Coach. Emily Van Buskirk, Pro Football Network. Good to see you back.
Good to see you.
You talk about philosophies that you've been able to learn from. How will your offensive philosophy moving forward affect quarterback recruiting, specifically, from your point of view?
Mm-hmm.
I did hear you mention fullback somebody, so that bodes well for offense. And I'm curious also, as a two-parter, you talk about the iron sharpening iron and those years when you guys were very tough, blue-collar mentality. How do you get back to that, like from a practice standpoint?
Yeah. Well, the first one, so on the quarterback perspective, Andrew and I are excited to find great quarterbacks for this place. And we are no different than the rest of the team organism that I mentioned. It's about Go ahead. Okay. But that was that in that time, like the way that we competed, I believe, well, let's just say this. Andrew wouldn't be where he was if I didn't make him a great player. But in all honesty, we pushed each other, and that's true in the quarterback room. What we want is competition. We want great quarterbacks, as many as we can get, that make sense for our roster composition and so on and so forth, to come in here and compete every day. So then the starter, it not only makes him the best he can be, but guess what? You're also only as good as your second, third, fourth quarterback, because you get banged up in football, right? You may have to play that second quarterback, that third quarterback, right? My time just finishing in Washington, Marcus Mariota was playing, and he was the backup quarterback. So I think about competition. I think about creating competition in that room, bringing in the best of the best, letting them go compete, right? And then the other parts of that, which Andrew mentioned, is supporting each other. Because once that competition is decided, all right, now we got to go support the guy in the room to go out there on the field and get it done.
Left side of the room, row 5, Harold.
Harold Gutman with the Bay Area News Group. This question's for Andrew. I'm sure many of the 30 people you talked to had head coaching experience. How much of a concern was that to hire someone with no head coaching experience, and then how did you kind of get over that?
Yeah, no, the bunch of different archetypes that we looked into, and a bunch of amazing folks, including, as you said, with head coaching experience, where there was a big, little, small, they're different leagues. And certainly something I took into consideration, right? Certainly something I took into consideration. Certainly something, Tavita, this is his first time, his first chance. I'm also a first-time GM, right? That's real. And there's also qualities that I think needed to be the right head coach at this time for Stanford University that Tavita embodies, right? That he embodies. So just like to Ann's question, candidates did not need to have Stanford experience. Our candidates did not need to necessarily have head coach experience. Certainly was an intriguing part of the process, but couldn't be more thrilled about where we ended up.
Right side of the room, row 5, Diego.
Diego Malacher, Stanford Daily. Stanford just improved upon its the previous season's win total for the first time since 2015. How does this year's team lay the groundwork for what the two of you are hoping to accomplish?
And brought the axe back. Okay, don't forget that important part. One of the words I mentioned that Andrew and I have talked a lot about, and thinking about this team and what Coach Frank Reich had done is belief. I think when you talk about the groundwork that's been laid, it starts there, right? Even just watching that game. And I will take this moment to say now, being on the East Coast for the last 3 years, it's clear why we got shafted in all those Heisman Trophy races, okay? Because it's really hard to watch West Coast sports on the East Coast. But Cal was one of the games I was able to stay up and watch, and our kids stayed up much past their bedtime to see that happen. That to see the belief in that team, right? The way the defense played, the way the special teams played, that the offense built off of that, like that's complementary football, but that was built on belief. Like you saw it happening in that game on that field, but that was bubbling under the surface all year, right? And that's something that we absolutely will build on that what's already been happening. Thanks, Diego.
We're going to stay on the right side of the room, row 3, Chris.
Hi, Coach. Chris Alvarez from ABC7. Congratulations. You talked about the first team meeting yesterday.
Yeah.
How nervous were you? How pre-planned was it? What was the moment like in that room? I'm assuming Andrew was right next to you, too.
Andrew was there. There were nerves. I think I have a healthy relationship with my nerves at this point. I welcome them. I know what it tells me is I know that I care about it, right? When I get nervous, that tells me that I'm in the right place. And walking into that team meeting, obviously we've done a lot of things around being here and walking in and getting pictures taken. It felt the most right standing in front of that room. I've dreamt about being in front of that room. And to be up there in front of those young men and having sat in those seats in that exact situation, I could just see at that moment how important it will be for Andrew and I to build something great for them and with them, and to allow them to realize their fullest dreams, and just put systems of support over and over in every way to help them realize that. And we're really excited about that.
Mm-hmm. We'll stay right side of the room, row 4.
Luca Maisie with Stanford on SI. This one's for you, Andrew. Can you speak a little bit more about Frank Reich and his senior advisor role?
Yeah, Frank, as you know, Frank did an amazing job. He also, I mean, he sort of did a little senior advising for me through this process, and had a chance to get to know Tavita towards the end, and was an incredibly helpful asset, you know, along with our search committee. And Frank's a phone call away. Linda gets him back in Carolina and the 5 grandkids, and it's his birthday like Thursday, I think. So happy birthday, Frank. But he's here. I mean, I feel very fortunate that Frank came for our young men. In you know, in many ways, Tavita and Frank are cut from a similar cloth. I mean, just the humility, the desire to lead through service, the joy they both get when others succeed. Like, it's, you know, that's part of what I felt. And Frank's a phone call away from Tavita. I got to see them have a nice 20-minute chat yesterday as he handed the office off to Tavita. And it was a special moment for them. I went and took my nap while they were talking. It was good. But it's you know, sitting on top of this organization and thinking about how do we just keep doing the next right thing and making progress, right? And I know that we are, you know, this step that we're in right now, these first few days, and the transition, like, we're doing the next right thing and we're taking steps forward. And that's what when go look back into March when Jay Green called me up on the phone when we didn't have a head coach and said, what do we do? Well, Jay, we don't tank for the first pick in the NBA draft here, right? Like, we don't do that. We have to take steps forward. I owe that to the locker room, and we are, and we're going to continue to do that, and couldn't be more excited.
Right side of the room, row 4, Stuart.
Okay, Tavita, you said you're willing to talk some X's and O's.
Come on.
Do you envision kind of running that classic Stanford smash mouth offense, and also just kind of what your experience working with a guy like Jaden Daniels maybe impacts what you see doing with the quarterback position going forward?
Yeah. Let me start with the Jaden question, because this will sound repetitive to some degree, but Jaden's superpower is one, the way that he works and processes and plays, and he's one of the most, like, he's a twitchy athlete, but he's also a twitchy processor, you know, and so much of what we did on offense, even going into his first season, was built around what he did really, really, really well, right, and just leaning into that. So that's what I learned, and that's, you know, speaks to my answer about just schematically what I see doing here. When it comes to what you're talking about, we will absolutely have a physical Stanford offense. I think there were a lot of times where that got and still gets categorized as like that was just a certain personnel or a certain specific scheme. But the reality is, and as I was answering the earlier question, there's a lot of different ways to impose your will, as I said, on an opposing defense, and that's going to be a key element of what we do, because there's really a misconception, and there always was, and it's one thing that we were most proud of in our time as players, is the misconception about Stanford student athletes is like, you know, they're silver spoon, they're intellectual, so it's, you know, there's a softness to it, when that actually couldn't be further from the truth, right? There is a grit and a toughness that exists in Stanford people that we will lean into, because that's consistent. That's something that I know in my bones. And so we'll use that, Stuart. Like, that will be something that we will have a physical, tough element that we will impose our will. And I can't say exactly what that's going to look like from a personnel, who's on the field, position standpoint, but I do know that we'll be built up front. And one thing I do know is there's always 5 offensive linemen on the field, and we're bringing that. We are going to make sure that position room is right, because we know that was a common thread through all those great Stanford teams, was the offensive line. And that's a place that we know we can recruit, that we will recruit, that we will make that the kind of the heart and soul of the offense.
We have time for a couple of more questions. We'll go row 5 on the left. Ben Parker.
Yeah, Ben Parker on through Raul back over here. I'm just kind of curious. I'm looking at your resume. You've coached a lot of different positions. For Tavita, you've coached a lot of different positions through your time at Stanford, in addition to quarterback, receivers, tight. I don't know how many. And also spent some time as a defensive something as well. Just talk about how those experiences, coaching a lot of different positions, you feel has kind of helped prepare you for this moment.
Yeah. Well, and Andrew mentioned that too. My time on defense. Any coach who's just getting into the profession, I recommend to all of them spend time on the other side of the ball than you played. I played quarterback pretty much my entire life. Almost exclusively. In high school, my dad was my offensive coordinator. I couldn't play on defense because we didn't have a backup quarterback. So he's like, sorry, man, you got to just play quarterback. So I spent a lot of time playing quarterback, but spending time on the other side of the ball was invaluable for me because you learn the game from the other angle, right, from the other side of the ball, which there are so many assumptions we make as offensive players or defensive players about the other side of the ball that simply aren't true, right, how they're taught certain techniques, how certain coverages behave. So that was really good for me to understand the breadth of knowledge that has to be present when you're preparing a game plan, right? Or you're coaching players or teaching technique. And so on from that, yes, I did. I spent time with the running backs, coaching Tyler Gaffney, Ryan Hewitt. I spent time with I coached the receivers and quarterbacks. And then obviously just focused on the quarterbacks a little bit later in that time. That just gave me an appreciation for just the different facets and how they all fit together. But it also, going back to kind of that connection and trust, right? Like that's going to be fostered in the locker room, but it's got to be fostered in the staff room as well, right? When we get in there and watch film together and we're coming up with a game plan, there's got to be so much communication and open communication. Like, I don't have all the answers. This is not about me. Like, yeah, I have a lot of football knowledge, but this is not about me. Like, I truly believe all of us are smarter than one of us. So we're going to get in that room and we're going to find the best answer, right? And we're not all going to have the same way of coming at it. We may have some disagreements. We may say, hey, I think here's the best way to execute a deuce block. No, here's what I think. And we're going to hash it out and we're going to get to the best answer for us. But then when we leave that room, because of that trust, connection, alignment, we're going to walk out of there completely aligned so that for our players, they know this is how we're doing it so they can go full speed ahead.
All right, we'll stay on the left side of the room, row 4. Tim.
Tim Kawakami, San Francisco Standard. Tavita, do you plan to be your own offensive coordinator? Are you going to, I know it's early, but do you plan to call the plays?
I do plan to call the plays. But I plan to have a staff. Like, I mean, it goes to the question we were just talking about. Like, we will have a staff that we're building this offense together. Because, again, I want to bring in a diverse staff with lots of different backgrounds, whether it's different systems, different schemes, NFL, college, right? We want a lot of fresh ideas so that we are building this thing around our Stanford student athletes, but building it together. So the short answer is yes, but we're going to have a big staff that does it together.
And Andrew also mentioned Fangio as part of your early career, and we know how important Vic was to Harbaugh's years here. Do you have an idea for a defensive coordinator? Is this something you've kind of carried with you? Here's a guy, when I get my head coaching spot, this is the guy I'm going to want to run my defense.
Yeah, we have some really good names and some folks that we're really excited to talk to. But we're gonna find not just a good defensive coordinator, but a good defensive staff that we're gonna build something really cool.
All right, we have time for one more. We'll go to the right side of the room, row 5. Diego.
Diego Malaker, Stanford Daily. Kind of stole the question a little bit, but I was just wondering for Andrew and for Tavita, this is kind of going to be the first time for both of you guys filling out a staff. Yeah. So how is that process what do you guys expect from that process? And then also, Andrew, what's it going to be like? I know you've worked with a committee in finding the head coach. How does that committee change, or whose input are you looking for in hiring those positions?
Yeah, we've got a lot of work to do, and Coach Pritchard runs the coach and vertical of this thing, and I'm here to support Tavita in finding the staff that works best for his vision on the football, right, and our vision on who this is. So we got a lot of work ahead of us. There is no doubt. There is no doubt. And we'll get out of our nice clothes after this and roll up our sleeves and get going. And certainly the process has started. And we got signing day tomorrow, of an amazing class of young men that have put a lot of work in, and so work's ahead of us. A lot of work's ahead of us, and we're ready to go.
Let me just add to that, because when we think about like building a staff, aside from specific names, the prerequisite is obviously we both speak the same language, that we want to teach great football. Like, we want to teach sound, great football to our student athletes. But beyond that, like, we are looking for connectors, we're looking for teachers, and we're looking for communicators, right? Because at the end of the day, like, going back to what I said about it's about people, you have to find folks in those rooms who can convey that messaging, right? Who can teach those techniques, who can teach the scheme, and that's really what it comes back to.
All right, everyone, that concludes today's press conference. Thank
Appreciate
you so much
y'all.
for joining,
Thank
and
you,
welcome
guys.
back to the farm, Coach Pritchard.